Welcome to the Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. I always begin the weekend when I can do the weekend review with John Ellis. With John Ellis, he is the founder and editor-in-chief of News Items, which I read every morning before I read anything else, and I think about 35,000 other people do. John, good Friday to you. I really want to get to CapEx, but I want people, especially people who are either living with or have lived with Parkinson's, to get your first story, because I think this is fascinating.
Yeah, it was in a website on a website called ScienceDaily.com, and I'll just read a paragraph from it. It goes like this: dogs trained to detect Parkinson's disease using scent have shown remarkable accuracy in new research. In a double-blind trial, they identified skin swabs from people with Parkinson's with up to 80% sensitivity and 98% specificity, even when other health conditions were present. I mean, that's astonishing. The findings offer hope. Yeah.
I was going to say, what can people do? Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, the findings offer hope for a simple, non-invasive diagnostic method using biomarkers that appear long before traditional symptoms, potentially allowing earlier treatment and slowed disease progression. So if you and I are veterinarians in business together, and we get two of these, let's say, German shepherds to do the Parkinson's sniffing test, we can partner with a local physician practice and make vast sums of money, charging $500 for the dog to sniff you, and potentially helping people live much better, healthier lives. So it's an enormous business opportunity. It's an incredible scientific discovery. It's amazing.
And if anyone out there has Parkinson's, I know of what you are suffering through because my father-in-law had it, and it's a difficult, long disease, but you can intervene early and you can help significantly. So I imagine it's going to become the practice care standard very, very quickly if they can replicate it. And if it's in the journal, ScienceDaily.com, I assume they've replicated it and published it. So that's a big deal. People should go read about that.
The research report is comprehensive and, peer-reviewed and all that stuff. So it's a really exciting development because obviously the sooner you get to, the sooner I learn that I might have Parkinson's disease, the more I can do about it. Not much I can do about it when, second stage or third stage is onset. So that's a terrific story.
Let's go to a bad story. The Epstein money.
So, the week has been consumed by what we call the Epstein files story. And yesterday, the Wall Street Journal posted a story that Donald Trump wrote an entry into a book that commemorated Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday party, and everybody's sort of exploded as a result. But the fact is that President Trump has never made any secret of the fact that he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein for more than a decade. They had a falling out. They didn't talk to each other thereafter. And the fact that he wrote a bawdy entry into a book commemorating Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday strikes me as one of the least significant stories of the year. The story that is significant, because the Epstein files story is significant. The story that is truly significant was published in the New York Times today, and it follows the investigation that's being conducted by Senator Ron Wyden, the Democrat of Oregon. It has nothing to do with Trump. It has everything to do with how Epstein shipped money around the world and the degree to which he was doing this. There were suspicious transaction reports that just one from JP Morgan Chase was $1.1 billion of wire transfers over a long period of time. That is indicative of not of sex trafficking, but of money laundering. And so I think that the serious reporting that will take place from here on is the extent of Jeffrey Epstein's money laundering operations, and if indeed that was the way that he amassed as much wealth as he did. When he died, his assets were $660 million. You could pay all of Sullivan and Cromwell, perhaps New York's most prestigious law firm, $660 million, and they would give you far better tax advice than Jeffrey Epstein ever would. So the question of what he was doing, how did he amass all this wealth, and what were the services that he provided to amass all this wealth? And it points ever more towards money laundering, and that, of course, raises the question: for whom was he laundering money? None of that has anything to do, as far as I can tell, with President Trump.
And suspicious activity reports, for the benefit of the audience, SARs, have been around for a long time. I can't believe this did not come out until today, given the amount of scrutiny put on Epstein over the decades. And it's one of those things where it's hiding in plain sight, and people didn't notice it because of the lurid nature of the criminal activity in which he is involved. But the money laundering deal here, that's with former Warsaw Pact and Soviet countries, and it might have a connection to the sex trafficking, but it's really money laundering. It's a very explosive story, well covered. Now, the one I want to shift to in our 4 minutes is to alert people to Sunday's news items, because hopefully you will publish that the CapEx expenditure take off, John. It's wild.
It is vast sums of money are being spent on internet infrastructure. It resembles, in fact, it exceeds the amount of money that was spent on the railroad infrastructure back in the early parts of the last century. And Paul Kudrowski, who wrote this newsletter about it, and who we quote frequently in news items, had this to say: "One of the abiding mysteries of the current political era is why the economy is, for the most part, not as worried as one might expect about tariffs, political uncertainty, and office renovation-driven Fed chair removal rumors. And we now have a possible answer. In a sense, there is a massive private sector stimulus program underway in the US. There is an AI data center spending program, one that is reallocating gobs of spending, as well as injecting even more. It is already larger than peak telecom spending as a percentage of GDP during the dot-com era, and within shouting distance of peak 19th century railroad infrastructure spending. So how big was this stimulus in the first quarter of this year? Back of the envelope, without AI data center investment, Q1 GDP contraction could have been closer to minus 2.1. AI capex was likely the early 2025 difference between a mild contraction and a deep one, helping mask underlying economic weakness. So basically what Paul is saying is that this AI infrastructure is sucking up just enormous amounts of money. That's having a distortive effect, but it's also keeping the economy, at least for the time being, in better shape than it might otherwise be.
The phrase that I caught in your brief memo to me is that it's a private sector stimulus bill, not unlike the amount of money that President Biden spent in his first and second year in his two big public spends that ignited inflation. But this isn't going to ignite, well, I don't know. Do you think private sector stimulus on this scale is inflationary, John Ellis?
I don't think we know. I mean, obviously, one thing that's inflated is salaries. Mark Zuckerberg hired a top AI researcher for, I think, $200 million was the pay package. He's poaching from Apple. He's poaching from OpenAI. He's offering these massive pay packages. So, AI salaries are going through the roof. But in theory, AI makes us more productive. It makes us better able to get done what we need to get done. So, that's not deflationary, but that doesn't point to widespread inflation. We'll see how it works out. One thing Paul points out, which I think is very true, is you have major venture capital companies all over the United States with billions of dollars to invest. And the vast amounts of money that they are investing, the vast percentage of money that they're investing in AI infrastructure is making it much more difficult for medium-sized and small-sized startups to get money.
John Ellis, I am going to look forward to Sunday's news items or a special edition of news items on Sunday because I'm very intrigued by this. First time I've seen anyone kind of quantify what the AI spend is doing in the country. So thank you for joining me, John Ellis. Go get news items. Just Google news items, John Ellis. You'll find the landing page. And thank you, John. Brent Gardner is the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at Americans for Prosperity, and he's a happy man this week, as I am, because the rescission went through. Now, I'm particularly happy because I worked for PBS from 1992 to 2002, their local affiliate, and did a national series for them. It was different then, still didn't need taxpayer money, but it was different then. Brent, we've done it. NPR and PBS should take public out of their name. Congratulations. I think AFP had a lot to do with this.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. It's a good first step. We certainly have a long way to go to fixing our nation's financial challenges, but this represents, I think, an important activity led by Republicans, signed on by the president, that takes that first big step at trying to deal with some of these places where we continue to spend money we don't have at a time where the American people are ready to make a different direction happen in this country.
Can you believe that you've heard people say $9 billion doesn't matter? I've heard that from the left. $9 billion is so small. It's not small. Number one, it's very important to put a stop to bleeding money into NPR and state-funded media. Number two, the USAID rescission was very important. I'm glad they saved PEPFAR, by the way. I had no objection to PEPFAR. But it's an example of another thing Trump has gotten done that Republican presidents have promised to do forever, and they've never gotten done.
No, you're absolutely right. And I agree. It's pretty tough sell on Main Street to think that $9.8 billion is not a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to Americans who are trying to get by after 4 years of bad Biden policies. And to your point, ultimately, this is a great effort by Republicans to do something that people have promised year in and year out during elections and never come through on. They did it. It passed both chambers, and now it goes on to the president, and it's real change for the American people.
Now, Brent, I'm curious what you guys think what's going to happen next, because Donald Trump's the 6-month anniversary of his first 6 months in the second term is Sunday. I don't know if the Sunday shows will cover it. I'm going to cover it relentlessly today. I got a long list of stuff that he's gotten done, including the rescission. Do you think there's an agenda for the next 6 months?
Yeah, Hugh, I think there is no question that this president, this administration, and this Congress are just getting started. We talk a lot about all that's been accomplished, but the good news is it's been years in the making, the opportunity to be able to have all three chambers. I think, quite frankly, the list is long of what still remains. And the great thing that we've seen about this president, about this Congress, is that they are focused on getting it done, routinely counted out, and then routinely achieving what they promised they were going to do. And I think that's what's coming next as well.
I'm just curious, do you believe that the Sunday shows will cover anything about the first 6 months? I don't think they will. Maybe Fox News Sunday will. But what about the legacy media stations? I think they're going to obsess on Epstein and not do a thing about the 6 months.
Yeah, I think if you want more than a parenthetical, you better watch Hugh Hewitt's show. But I don't expect them to highlight this. I don't think they're celebrating this. I think ultimately what you might see is them lamenting the type of progress that Americans called for, they voted for, and that now they're getting from this Congress and this president. I don't know if the shows will cover it, but I think the American people are talking about it, and they want more. They're hungry for more.
Brent, I talked to Senator Lankford yesterday and Senator Daines. Senator Lankford is on finance. Senator Daines, of course, pretty important guy in the Republican caucus. They're both committed to another reconciliation. Do you think it'll happen?
I think time will tell. I think that we've seen really great signals seeing those two folks in those positions say that. I know the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Whip have also had similar comments. We know as an organization that we've already felt outreach from the Hill for people saying, not just should we do it, but what do you want in that next package? I think that kind of effort, that's what we want to see. We've got to start taking action today. The bills behind us are done. And I think it's great to hear members of Congress talking about what's next like that. There's plenty to put in another package for sure.
Now, do you think, last question, exit question, do you think protectprosperity.com, do you think that the economy is going to bubble now? I think it's just going to sparkle and continue to grow. That's my take, because people have a long-term tax code in which they can invest and upon which they can rely. So I'm very optimistic about the next 2 years. What does Brent Gardner and AFP think?
I think we're cautiously optimistic. I think there's reason to understand that certainty injected in the marketplace is a good thing, but we're in a complex and dynamic economy affected not only by domestic policy, but international things. So I can tell you the one thing I know is not going to happen now. It's not going to crater because Congress didn't get it done. We're going to have an opportunity now to see what happens with the continuation of the 2017 tax law, and then ultimately some of the new provisions in here. So I'm hopeful that this will lead to economic growth, but we're going to keep working, whether it's on additional rescissions packages, reconciliation packages, energy, across the board. There's so much that we're going to continue to work on that hopefully leads to not just a bubble, but the kind of sustained growth we know we need.
And I hope AFP is going to be a watchdog on implementation on all this, because that's a lot of money that got spent in reconciliation. I know you guys pay great attention to this, so I want people to go to protectprosperity.com and become a supporter of Americans for Prosperity, one of the great sponsors of my show. Brent, have a great weekend. Good to talk to you as always. All of you who are out there who are going to be spending the weekend doing weekend warrior stuff, I want to remind you, like I do every weekend, take your Relief Factor, another great sponsor of ours. There's mine. Every single day in this first hour, I get it out, take my 4 pills out, and if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see it. And if you're listening, hopefully you heard the sound effect of a packet being opened and a sip of water being taken, and Karen curcumin and resveratrol and omega going down the throat to make me feel better, because it's the natural supplements that help your anti-inflammatory system, that gets rid of the minor aches and pains that follow exercise. I should be out there doing a 10K in the morning. I'm hopeful about that. Saturday morning, that's what I try and do. And if I do, because Relief Factor, I will not be sore for the rest of the weekend. If you're experiencing anything in your drive home this afternoon and you're feeling discomfort, or you're still working out on the West Coast and you're commuting somewhere and you're just not feeling great because your back hurts or your neck hurts, try our Relief Factor, please. You will thank me. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to their website, find the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day, and then order it at relieffactor.com. Finally, before we turn over to the week in review and the month in the review and the half year in review with Matt Continetti at the bottom of the hour, I want to remind you that it's been a horrific week and month for Texas. And so Food for the Poor is a sponsor of ours, and we have stood up a campaign with them. And I'm asking you, please, before you do anything else this weekend, send a donation down there. The need is endless. The devastation's far more. We know about the worst things, the loss of the children. We know about the loss of the young adults. We know about the death toll at 135 and going up. Not a lot of people know that a lot of people lost everything. Most people do know that the whole country has surged a lot of support down there for the victims and for the first responders. Thank you in advance. We trust Food for the Poor to deliver the goods whenever they have a partner close by, and they do in San Antonio, and they have staged enormous effort, and you're helping to fund it. Thank you for doing that. If you go to hughhewitt.com, you can find the Help Texas banner at the top of my website. All you have to do is hit that. You can also text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555, or do it the old-fashioned way right now. Snail mail, nope, call them. 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. $50 is one box of supplies. 5,000 is 100 box of supplies. Anywhere in between. Thank you in advance for helping the people of Texas out. Joined by Matt Continetti. Matt, of course, is the Director of Domestic Policy Studies at American Enterprise Institute. He's a contributor to Commentary Magazine, a daily, almost daily participant in the Commentary Podcast, which is knocking on 19,000 subscribers over at YouTube. We encourage you to like and subscribe the Commentary Podcast. And for the Free Press, he's a columnist. Matt, a good Friday to you. Ever since you set your goal of 10,000, you've just blown past milestone after milestone. So what's the limit for the Commentary Magazine podcast?
There's no limit. I'm going to be like Elon Musk and shoot for Mars. So we're going to hit 20,000 YouTube subscribers by Labor Day, Hugh, and then we're going to seek to double that in the coming year. So the commentary
I learned
grows
from,
and grows.
I learned from Comfortably Smug on Ruthless that you get a plaque from Google when you go to 100,000. So that's my end game. I want the plaque. Matt, on Sunday, we will have the 6-month anniversary for the second time of a Donald Trump term. And I've been listening to you pretty closely as you're trying to inject into the Commentary podcast notice of achievement. And I want to run down my list and then run down with you. In the first 6 months of his second term, this is just what I think is important. The Iranian nuclear program was destroyed and the threat of proliferation to a theocracy was shattered. Israel was restored to the status of the equal of any of our allies on the planet. NATO countries committed to a 5% defense budget. The border is closed. Tax cuts were extended and expanded. The key rates were made permanent. The defense rebuild is underway. The first year is funded. Inflation is calmed. DEI and CRT are exiled. Title IX is protected. Elite higher education has been served notice. It must comply with the Constitution and civil rights law. NPR and PBS are defunded. USAID is defunded. The U.S. Steel deal happened. The AI and energy investment in Pennsylvania, model for every state, happened. And we've got commitments of hundreds of billions of dollars in the United States. A reader sent me a note. You have to include the Pakistan-India de-escalation and the treaty between the DRC and Rwanda. I'm not so sure about those two because they could change tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Democrats in these 6 months have taken up profanity as a practice and have embraced Comrade Mamdani in New York as the future of their party. What do you think of his first 6 months in that list?
I think they've been incredibly successful, Hugh. I think we look at Trump's achievements in this time period through the lens of what he promised on the campaign trail and what voters who supported him wanted, according to the exit polls. And when you look at what voters said were their priorities in the 2024 election, bringing radical change to Washington, reviving the American economy, and dealing with the migration crisis that ensued from a 4-year open border under Joe Biden. Trump has made great gains in all three of these dimensions of policy. Change has come to Washington. There's no doubt to that. Your list speaks to all of the change. The border is closed. There were 0 entries in the last month. That's the second month in a row, I believe, with 0 entries. And the deportations are beginning. And in fact, they're having such an impact already that some people are getting wary of them. That's actually a sign of success for Trump. And then there's the economy. And despite all of the warnings, all of the predictions of doom from the establishment economists, the liberal establishment economists, Trump has been waging his trade war, and inflation has remained stable. It has fallen, actually. Now it's somewhat stable. It came in within expectations in the past month. And we have records in the stock market. We have a full employment economy, close to full employment, and gas prices and egg prices have fallen. So if you just look at what voters wanted Trump to accomplish, he's already accomplished it. And then you add to that the foreign policy victories. You add to that the tax bill, which not only prevented a massive tax increase, but also incorporated Trump's populist tax ideas from the campaign trail, most famously no tax on tips. And you have just a remarkable run for President Trump midway through his first year of his second term.
When I come back with Matt during the break, we're going to break down some of these. He did not put an order on that. Matt, before we go to break, do you have a number one accomplishment?
The border, without a doubt.
Oh, interesting. I thought it was blowing up Iran's nuclear program, and we'll talk about that during the break. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm going to talk to Matt during the break. He'll be back on the other side. We do this every Friday in a week in review, and I promise you we will eventually mention not Joseph. What was Epstein's first name? I can't remember.
Jeffrey.
Sleazebag? Jeffrey Epstein. We will mention Jeffrey Epstein sleazebag and criminal. Matt, I agree with you that the border being closed is probably the most important political thing that Donald Trump did, because they're going to wave the, quote, bloody flag about the open border, they being Republican nominees. Do you want to go back to that? For as many years as I've got left on this planet, we'll be talking about Joe Biden's open border versus Donald Trump's closed border. But I think, and I'm always leery, history will say, I have no idea what history will say, but I'm guessing history is going to focus on the demolition of the Iranian nuclear regime if it stays demolished. How significant is that if it stays demolished?
If it stays demolished, it's extremely significant. Look, I think that the Operation Midnight Hammer, the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program in coordination with Israel, was a huge accomplishment of the first 6 months. It was an operational achievement, simply to plan the attack, to come up with the technology of the bunker busting bombs, to do it under total stealth cover, with the media chasing B-2s headed toward the Pacific when in fact they were flying over the Atlantic. This is an incredible achievement. It's definitely set back the Iranian nuclear program. And most important, Israel and the United States have overmatch in the skies of Iran. And so if something happens, if the Iranians try to rebuild, if they try to move some of the material from the other sites, not Fordow, the underground sites, but the other sites, then Israel or the United States can always strike again. The underlying problem, of course, is that the Iranian regime remains in place. And so it's all the more important that we keep up the pressure, that we continue to exert maximum pressure economically on the Iranians, on the mullahs, and that we also maintain a posture of peace through strength to constrain them from rebuilding the program. That, Hugh, made a change in American foreign policy. We're now at the point where we're not going to allow our enemies to achieve nuclear weapons. We're not going to play this diplomatic shell game that allowed a country like North Korea to basically walk right into being a nuclear power under the cover of diplomacy. Trump stopped that. He did what presidents prior to him only promised to do. And for that act, he deserves a great plaudits, and I think will be recognized in the history books.
You know, it's an interesting thing. I had a friend who was involved in the North Korean negotiations back in '94. He always reminds me North Korea would have responded to a strike on their facilities by leveling Seoul. And I think it's a fair point. Iran did not invest in any kind of counterstrike. They had no counterstrike, right? They couldn't do anything.
Well, this is a key point, Hugh, because our Operation Midnight Hammer came toward the end of the 12-day war. And remember, when Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, many people, including me, were saying, well, it doesn't seem like they're actually hitting the nuclear sites all that much. What were they doing? Well, they were going after command and control. They were going after the missile launchers. They were taking out the means Iran had to retaliate. And the longer that operation took place, the more the Iranian retaliatory capacity was destroyed. In the North Korean case, you're right.
We're talking about the marvel of Operation Midnight Hammer, and Matt was just noticing that Operation Rising Lion, which went before it for 11 days, took out the ability of Iran to do anything to its neighbors, which is why the Clinton team say they couldn't obstruct the North Korea facilities in 1994 because North Korea, run by a despot, would have leveled Seoul and killed millions of people. Matt, you were about to say something about North Korea.
Well, what I would say is that in a North Korean scenario, you might have to consider taking out the conventional artillery that threatens Seoul in addition to the nuclear site. Of course, this is a hypothetical, but I will say this. With Operation Midnight Hammer, Trump essentially endorsed the Begin Doctrine, named after the former Israeli prime minister, who said that Israel would never allow one of its enemies to obtain a nuclear weapon and pose an existential threat to the Jewish state. And that's why Israel took out the nuclear plant at Osirak in Iraq in the 1980s. It's why it took out the Syrian nuclear plant in 2007. And here, this is why we had Operation Rising Lion and the 12-day war against Iran. Trump endorsed this. He worked hand in hand with Israel in a way no American president has ever done before. He thanked the IDF and Bibi Netanyahu and God in his speech on the night of Midnight Hammer. So this will be something that will be remembered for a long time. And I would just connect it to the border in this way, Hugh. Both the strike on the Iranian nuclear program and shutting down the southern border are things that the experts have said could not be done. They could
you're
not be
right.
done. We have to go by other means. We have to either have an amnesty plan or we have to use diplomacy. Trump showed that they can be done. All it takes is confidence and willpower.
Let me go to the end point of that it can be done. You guys talked about this either today or yesterday on the Commentary podcast, which is defunding NPR and PBS. It is punching way above its weight. It's only $1 billion, but it's a symbolic $1 billion in the way, I think you said it, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was a symbolic thing that people were supposed to do for a long time. Republicans have been trying to put the stake through the heart of NPR and PBS for decades. I used to work for PBS, and I was trying to kill myself then, but not really, because it wasn't bad. It wasn't, well, I worked from 92 to 2002. It wasn't this crazy. Now it's absolutely crazy. What is the significance of that small but very noticeable? My goodness, the crying from the left is extraordinary.
Oh, it's amazing. I think it is significant. It's another item in the list of promises that past Republican leaders have made that only Donald Trump has kept. And so you mentioned the move to the moving the embassy in the first term. Now we've defunded NPR and PBS for the next 2 years. Think about the Department of Education. Ronald Reagan promised to close the Department of Education in the 1980, the original MAGA campaign. The Republican revolutionaries in 1994 wanted to close the Department of Education. It hasn't been done. What Trump is doing is essentially cutting it in half, radically reducing it through his executive power. Will have the same effect as just statutorily wiping it out, I believe. And so here's another example of Trump being able to achieve something that past Republicans have not been able to accomplish. The question is why? And I think it's a combination of factors. The first thing is President Trump's incredible authority over the Republican Party and Republicans in Congress in particular. And the second thing, Hugh, and this can't be overlooked, is that Joe Biden's presidency showed conservatives and Republicans what the alternative is, what the left wants to achieve. And after the pandemic, after the school closures, after the social distancing and the masking, after the summer of George Floyd, the DEI craziness, the gender hysteria, Republicans and conservatives are much more cohesive, and they understand that they have to accomplish these things now, because if the left gets power again, we'll just be right back at square one.
So, Matt, the Democrats have not been sitting by idly. They've been screaming, usually with profanity, obscenity, and vulgarity practiced, not natural, not someone who normally works in profanity. They're just putting it everywhere because they got to be authentic. But they've also nominated Comrade Mamdani to be the face of the party. Are they nuts? Yeah. Do you think they're going to really put their arms around him?
I think a lot of them are nuts. Is the truth. Look, the flip side of Trump's accomplishments over these past 6 months is that the Democrats have continued to sink. When you look at some of these ratings, Hugh, the Democrats are the most unpopular that they have been in decades. Their fundraising is not what it should be under a president that so many Democrats oppose. The recruitment's not quite there. The primary electorate is nominating figures like Mamdani. And when you hear a Democratic congressman describe their town halls, these Democratic congressmen say that the constituents at the town halls are urging the Democratic congressman to embrace violence to resist Trump. You have the lawlessness in the streets of Los Angeles and elsewhere in defiance of federal law and the federal police power to police our borders and our immigration system. And you have this picture of a party that is in self-destruct mode. And the question is, how will they be able to change that? there's no leader on the scene, it seems to me, who's going to be able to bring some common sense to the Democratic Party. I was watching Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, visit South Carolina this past week. And I have to say, he's not a very inspiring figure. I think he kind of knows what message he needs to deliver, but he's not someone who's going to get people up on the hustings for him, especially the type of radicalized base the Democrats have now. This spells big trouble ahead of the election next year, where, as Harry Enton of CNN points out, the Democrats are not where they were in terms of the generic ballot at this point in Trump's first term. They're lagging behind because as people might have qualms with certain aspects of the Trump presidency, but they fear and loathe the Democratic alternative even more.
Parties can and do go the way of the Whigs. They can disappear. And I don't know that, I'm not saying the Democrats are going to disappear, but they're working at it. I mean, they really are working at becoming a permanent minority by going so far to the left. Matt, earlier on the program, John Ellis was on with me, who does news items, really the indispensable newsletter. And he pointed out to me a story today about the suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein. He thinks the Wall Street Journal story is idiocy, as do I. And you guys just completely decimated it. That's not the appropriate. You took more than a tenth of it apart on the podcast this morning. So I agree with your assessment. But the suspicious activities report, everyone's always wondering, where did Epstein make his money? Turns out it looks like he was money laundering. Did you read that story yet?
Yeah, that was an interesting story, and I came across it under news items as well. There's so much we don't know about how Jeffrey Epstein made his money. He clearly was some sort of con man. He was definitely bilking the rich men that he befriended and lived a life of this high-flying socialite while committing these terrible crimes of sex trafficking. That's why so many people felt disappointed when the DOJ came out and said, look, we reviewed the material and there really is nothing there in terms of, did he have a quote unquote client list? Was he blackmailing people? Was he murdered? Was he working for a foreign intelligence service? The message that came so quickly and so bluntly, I think, that the people who had invested so much in finding out the answers about Jeffrey Epstein became disappointed. And it created a political problem for Donald Trump that I think, Hugh, he's only beginning to turn around right now.
Now, let's close on that. I don't think it's a political problem, Matt, because it's so absurd. But why do you think it's a political problem? We got 1 minute.
Yeah, only because it set the White House messaging apparatus in a different direction. In Washington, you're either on offense or defense, and you never want to be on defense. And President Trump thought that he was going to be on offense at least for the next few weeks, coming off all the remarkable victories we've been discussing. But because the story developed the way it did, with the infighting within the administration, then the Democrats seizing it, then people who are part of the large MAGA coalition also raising questions, that put the White House on the defensive. And it's only just in the past 24 hours, Hugh, with this Wall Street Journal story, that President Trump is back on the offensive, which is where he needs to be, and of course, where he likes to be.
Matt Continetti, as always, thank you for joining me on a Friday. That's a wonderful recovery of the presidency's worst moment thus far and a summary. Thank you, Matt. Matt Continetti and I disposed of the Epstein problem during the break. You can listen to that entire interview over at my YouTube channel. It'll be posted by Harley very, very soon, and you can find out what we both think about it, which is that Donald Trump has turned the corner on what was a nonsense story to begin with and has back on the offense again, which is appropriate. Won't stop the left from being the left, but it will still be. It's not. There is no scandal. There's nothing involving Donald Trump. There's a lot of suspicious activity reports having to do with money laundering that's got nothing to do with Trump. But you heard John Ellis talk about that in the first segment today. I want to tell you before the hour closes about Consumer Cellular, our great sponsor, because I can sense that a lot of you, I know the majority of you over 50 are paying too much on your cell phone. You're buying a lot of data you don't need. You can have savings without sacrificing the service. You can get the greatest cell phone service in the world, and you don't have to pay an arm and a leg. Do me a favor. Go and find your phone bill whatever it is, before you call 1-800-411-4454. That's 1-800-411-4454. By the way, my promotional code is Hugh25. If you just say Hugh25, they'll give you $5 off each of the first 5 months of your new plan. And you will get a new plan because you're going to save money. For example, if you want unlimited data and you're over 50, I don't know why you want unlimited data if you're over 50, but if you do, you can have 2 lines of unlimited data for $60 a month. You'll save money. Chances are, when you call them, 1-800-411-4454, you're going to find out that you really do not need what you were buying, not even close, and you're going to save a lot of money. So either call them, 800-411-4454, or go to their website, consumercellular.com/Hugh. That's consumercellular.com/Hugh. Finally, I know that the 52nd Annual American Legislative Exchange Council meeting has broken up in Indianapolis. People are making their way to the airport and flying home. I think about 1,400 state legislators and staff were gathered in Indianapolis to plan the future of their state legislative efforts. And it is a wonderful laboratory of idea exchange. And my friends at the American Legislative Exchange Council, which sponsor this show, and also bring all these legislators together and put together the task force and draft the model bills, they're going to have so much to talk about next week. And if you want to stay ahead of that curve, go and sign up for the State of the State newsletter. It's free. alec.org/Hugh. alec.org/Hugh. When you get the State of the State newsletter, you'll find out what is interesting in Washington State and what is interesting in Florida and what is a disaster in New York City and New York State and what is maybe a precursor of everything to come in New Hampshire, which is why the most recent state to adopt universal school choice. You'll find that all out in the ALEC newsletter, but you got to sign up for it. alec.org/Hugh. alec.org/Hugh. We come back. Ben Domenech and Superman. Yes, he saw the movie and he did not like it. My friend Schroeder loved it. And they're both comic book gluttons for punishment. So I got to find out when I talk to Ben Domenech next. Plus, another walk through Donald Trump's first 6 months of his second term. It's Friday. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That means Ben Domenech is in the house. How are you, Ben?
Bye.
Ben, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good to talk to you. I want to begin with, of all things, Superman, because I listened to the Big Ben show, and I haven't seen it yet, but it is very rare that two people I get along with and like a lot completely disagree. My friend Schroeder, who is a comic book nut and a sort of a genius, lives down in Tennessee now. He left California. He liked it a lot. He got to me before you did your podcast. So I wrote to him a note about this saying, boy, Ben didn't like Superman at all. And he wrote back, he relies on the authenticity argument, which is bogus. Everything he complains about has been true at some point. Now, Gunn did mess up Jor-El, but I don't care. It made for good drama. As to the Israeli angle, I view it as a war generally, not the issue specifically. Who the heck knew serious Jewish people and people over 60 knows Ben Gurion? Soups was inspirational in that he would call the average current youngster to a higher standard that is common today. Would it fall short of the standards of my youth? Yes. Would it be a vast improvement over current standards? Yes. What do you think, Ben?
I mean,
Fabulous episode. I also thought, oh my gosh, if these two ever meet, Schroeder and Domenech, they're never going to stop talking about comic books.
Well,
because
I would love to talk to him about it. I don't know him, but I'd love to talk to him about it. And here's the thing: this is just a fundamental difference of opinion about what Superman is supposed to be. If you want Superman to be this kind of human version of
Schroeder went crazy after this, and he sent me a second text after he'd listened to you again, I think. He said, Ben is dead wrong on the portrayal of Jonathan Kent. This pause is very authentic to a small Kansas farmer, very inarticulate, but his very minimal speech to Clark of UBU is based on a lifetime of example that taught the boy how to be a man and to be a hero. If there's a manhood issue these days, it lies in no small part in the fact that we talk it to death, but we don't do it. In all the years I knew my paternal grandfather, a Minnesota small farmer, I could write down everything he said on a sheet of paper. When I talked to my dad about that fact, he just said, yep, Pa Kent is inarticulate in this film, but there are many ways to teach besides with words.
But see,
Ben Domenech, over to you.
This is a difference of opinion because my vision
Galaxy, by the way, is my second favorite series of movies, other than the Avengers trilogy.
The two Guardians 2, I think, really stands up in retrospect as being one of the best entries in the series, in part because that emotional beat with Michael Rooker is just, it actually hits, and you get a lot of drama, I think, there that really works. But again, this is a James Gunn movie directed by James Gunn, made by James Gunn, and star and has his brother in it. He always has to throw a roll to his brother to make sure that he gets that SAG card.
Ron Howard, Clint Howard. Yep.
Yeah. So
get to the serious. Let's get to the vegetables. And I'm going to set it up, talk to you during the break, and come back. We are coming up on Sunday to the 6-month anniversary of Donald Trump's second swearing in. All right. So he's been in office 6 months. I made a list. This is Hugh's list. It's nobody else's list of what I think he did the most important. The Iran nuclear program is destroyed. The threat of proliferation to a theocracy is shattered. Israel has been returned to the status of the equal of any of our allies, fully and totally in alliance with us. NATO countries have committed to 5%. The border is closed. The tax cuts have been expanded and extended. Key rates have been made permanent. Defense rebuild is underway, first year funded. Inflation is calm. DEI and CRT are exiled. Title IX is protected. Elite higher education has been served notice. Comply with the Constitution and the Civil Rights Act. NPR and PBS are defunded. Gosh, that is great. USAID is defunded. U.S. Steel deal has happened. The AI energy investment in PA has happened. And there are commitments of hundreds of billions of dollars in investment in the United States. And then a reader sent me the note. Pakistan and India, you forgot them, and I didn't forget them. I'm just not sure I'm going to credit DJT with that.
Yeah.
And then DRC and Rwanda. Of that list, before we go to break, we got a minute. Which one is your favorite or most important?
Well, I think those are two different things. To me, my favorite is actually the defunding, because that's been something that every Republican has promised over the years. They've all promised it. They've all said they were going to do it, and nobody's done it. And within 6 months, he did it. So that's actually my personal favorite, because it just, it's one of these things that always stuck in my craw. Every Republican says they're going to do these things, and then they don't do it. But the most important, I quite honestly think, is reestablishing America's presence in the world.
It's deterrent. Absolutely. Ben, as we're going to break, you said the most important is reestablishing America in the world. I agree, but I see that in the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program because it's real. Do you see it elsewhere?
I think it's there, but I also think it's our posture towards China. I think it's our posture towards the Middle East generally. The way that the Biden administration treated Israel, I think people have come to understand. You and I understood it, but I don't think the rest of folks necessarily understood how badly they were being treated. And I think that this is a situation now where the president has really reestablished the proper relationship that we ought to have with NATO, which is to say that we expect you to live up to the obligations that you've been making for years and never living up to, and that he believed that that was something that he could get. And I think that that attitude is adjusting. Now, they still need to live up to a lot of those commitments, but the truth is that when we look back at the Biden administration, he ran on the idea that he was going to reestablish normalcy in domestic politics, and that he would reestablish normalcy in terms of our relationship with the world, and he accomplished neither. He instead went far left of his career when it came to domestic politics, and then when it came to foreign policy, it turned out to be completely discombobulated. And quite frankly, I truly believe that there are certain points in this presidency where he did not understand Joe Biden did not understand he was the president. He thought of himself still as being the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee or something like that, as opposed to being the leader of the free world. And our complete disastrous failure to live up to those obligations, I think, really set the world on a course where we would not have been able, I think, Hugh, to survive the next 4 years without a major conflict. And now I think that we will. And I believe that that's because of the approach that Donald Trump has taken.
Huge. That it's a counterfactual, so we'll never know, but it's huge that we can even suggest that. By the way, before we go back on the network, we got a minute. Is the Lex Luthor in the new Superman as good as Gene Hackman?
No, he's not. And Nicholas, which is a shame because, by the way, the cast is not the problem. Nicholas Holt's a great actor. Cornsweet's fine. Brosnahan, I love from Miss Maisel. You know, there's like some good people on it. The problem is that Holt is just like chewing the scenery in a way that is not entertaining. It's like the whole dynamic in the movie, he's like shouting out these orders to these people around him as if he's like the leader of a video game team or something like that. And it just does not, it doesn't impress. Lex Luthor should be an impressive guy in terms of his approach.
Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman was a great Lex Luthor.
Yeah, he was great. Gravitas, and you needed that in this movie.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That, of course, is John Andrazik, Superman. And I didn't expect to go that long, but these people are passionate out there. They're very, very passionate. Ben, I do not count it as an achievement of President Trump, but it is significant that the Colbert Show has been canceled. I understand you agree with that. Why?
So I want to tell you just a little brief story about my experience with Stephen Colbert. First off, I met him years ago. I met him at the launch of his initial Colbert Report. He actually came to Capitol Hill, and for whatever reason, he and I ended up in a meeting together with a bunch of people who are the representatives of the Republican press groups. You know, like so all the press secretaries, all the comms directors.
Yeah.
And I sort of interviewed him in front of them, with him making his pitch to them that please send your members onto my show. Basically, you know, I really want to be able to have politicians on my show. I'm going to treat you fairly. I'm not going to be, someone who is, corrupted by his own political views. You know, I'm a Southerner. I'm an Episcopalian. I have, some overlap with some of these. I understand this more than some of these Hollywood people. And I liked him, and since then, I went. I went when he was doing the Late Show. I actually was on set there the evening that the National Review Against Trump cover came out, which I contributed to, which he talked about at the time and called me out by name and that kind of thing. It was also, though, something where I really saw the politics just take over his show. I actually would encourage people to look back at some of his record. When he was on the Dana Carvey show, when he was doing some of these other things, he was a very funny guy. He has the capability to be very funny. Politics broke his brain. Trump broke his brain. And the fact that CBS is not even renewing the show with a new host is an indication that late night is no longer the force that it once was in our society, our culture, and is being dismissed by people, in part because it's just not funny anymore. It's three essentially identical shows, and Seth Meyers, Jimmy Kimmel, and Colbert, and then Fallon's a little less political, but it's still one of these things where just doesn't make any sense anymore. It doesn't entertain people. It's not funny. And I think that it's a significant cultural development, and I think that, quite frankly, Jimmy Kimmel should be planning ahead for his future, because he's going to be on a streaming network before you know it.
I want to add you're right about Colbert. Early on, I was on his show 20 years ago when I had a book come out.
I was going to say, I thought you were on. I didn't want to just say that.
And it was hilarious because I knew I was a prop. And he came in before in the green room. We had a nice chat. I think he's Catholic, not Episcopalian. But in any event, Northwestern guy. And we had a lovely, lovely chat. And he was great to me. He sold the book. He was very funny. It was completely relaxed. I thought he was funny. Now, I want to know, do you think it's him or do you think it's his writer's room? Because I think the writer's room, like most of legacy media, have been taken over by the youngs, and they're not funny.
I think you are correct in that analysis. He has 200 people working on that show.
What?
That is absurd.
No, he doesn't.
200 people working on that show. Okay, and I don't know how big that writer's room is, but the point is, it's oversized. It's dominated by young people, and they are just not funny, and they're very politically woke. And they're out of step and out of tune with American society. I mean, I'm gobsmacked.
It takes 200 people to do an hour of television?
Yes. He literally said that in his announcement, by the way. So it's not just me making that up. My suggestion would be this. If I was CBS, I would say, let's move the show. Let's move the show to Chicago, to St. Louis, to some or to Texas, to figure out a different place to put that show. Because if you are dealing with New York writers' rooms, you're going to get the same crop of people. They're all friends with each other. They all, tell the same kinds of jokes. And instead, what you need is the kind of people who are writing Shane Gillis's monologue at the ESPYs.
Oh my gosh, that was hilarious. Oh, was that funny? But we can't talk about it too much because it's Shane Gillis. Let me turn, because I got to ask you before we run out of time about Comrade Mondani. I think it's suicide. I think it's political suicide what they're doing. What do you think about Comrade Mondani?
I think the fact that Chuck Schumer, after all these years, doesn't have the guts to stand up and say this is unacceptable is a just total indictment of him and his career. This should be easy.
Ooh.
It should be very, very easy for him to stand up and say, this is not welcome in our party. This is not our future. It's not what we believe. It's not what the American people believe. We've seen poll after poll, and by the way, thankfully, encouragingly, over the last couple of weeks, that show that the American people still support Israel. And the simple fact is that the things that Mondani has said, besides the economic craziness, I mean, leave that out of the equation. It's stuff that you do not want as a toxin within your party. And that, to me, should be very easy for someone like Chuck Schumer, who has always been pro-Israel, to resist and to push back within his own coalition. The fact that he isn't, I think, is an indictment of him.
That's a very well put. A toxin within their party, and he's going to grow, and it's going to be like 7 days later or 7 months later or 7 years later. It's going to take over the whole party. It's going to be a zombie party. I want to close by getting you on the record about Epstein. I think it's all nonsense. I don't think there's anything there. I've never paid any attention to it until this week because he was a criminal and a horrible human being, and I think Donald Trump severed ties when he got a whiff of it.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Journal story and then the New York Times story today? The suspicious activity reports, that's damning. John Ellis brought that to my attention from news items. I didn't know about that. What do you make of the Epstein stories?
Well, I will just give an overall answer, which is that I think that the glow around Epstein as like a tawdry affair is in some ways a distraction from the actual questions that we should ask about some of these relationships that he had. Ones that should have been asked and investigated a long time ago by responsible journalists and looked into. But I think that this is also a situation where the left is just completely leaning into this at this moment because they are smelling blood in the one area where they can try to create some discord on the right. And I think that there's some people on the right who are helping it. I thought that free press piece by Park McDougall, which Brett Baer quoted last night on Special Report, I would recommend it to people about the influencers who are trying to use Epstein to basically go after Trump and punish him a little bit for disagreeing with them on things like Iran.
Oh,
and some of these
interesting.
other
I didn't read it. I read Uri Berliner's piece yesterday 3 times because it's the last rights for NPR and PBS. It's a great piece, but I didn't see the other one on Epstein.
Check out Park's piece. It's got a good point to it. But my overall take is there is not some big thing there. It's not the big, sort of solution to all, encompassing conspiracy theories that people would like to have. And so, what I do believe in is transparency. Go for it. Say you want as much transparency as possible. I just think the ultimate people who wanted something to come out of this are not going to be satisfied by the result.
They never would. A conspiracy theorist is never satisfied. They never.
No.
Ben Domenech, follow him at bdomenech on X. Go and download the Big Ben Show. Like and follow it. Subscribe to The Spectator, where he is the editor at large. And if you're a Superman fan, I go to your separate corners and take a deep breath. I gather you're going to have the Anchorman fight, the legendary Anchorman Rumble.
Batman opinions too.
Ben Domenech, thank you. Have a great weekend. We have a great sponsor, AmericanFederal.com. They buy and sell gold. They will sell you as much gold as you want. The more you buy, the less the commission. They will also buy your gold from you if you need to sell some gold. But Nick Grovich and his team have been at it for 44 years, and they're the very best in the business. That's why I long for them to be a sponsor. Their phone number is 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694. And for the last many months, Nick and his team have been sponsoring the Daily Market Update, and I appreciate it greatly. And I buy my gold from Nick, and I send you there because it's transparent and honest, and you can just count on it. What you buy is what you get. You'll talk about commission structure before you do it. You'll know what you're getting. I always recommend people diversify their wealth into some dirt and some gold and some stocks and some bonds and some cash because I am not an investment advisor. That's what every investment advisor has always told me. Diversify, diversify, diversify. And then I take the gold that I buy from Nick Grovich or anybody else in my long career in broadcast. I bought it from other people. That's why I like Nick so much. I have something to compare it against. Then I put it in a safety deposit box and forget about it, knowing that I'm diversified, knowing that gold has more than kept pace with inflation for 100 years. Today, gold closed at $3,355.40 an ounce, up $10 an ounce. It never really closes. Gold trades 24/7 around the world because it is a reserve currency for a lot of countries. I was listening last night to the Andrew Roberts biography of Churchill. I had no idea that Britain was almost out of money in 1940, and they were taking the gold reserves out of Canada and giving them to the United States because the isolationists wouldn't let us support Great Britain. Gold, every central bank in the world knows where the gold is, and they know who's got it, and there are a bunch of central bankers who are buying it, which is explaining why it's at $3,355 an ounce. But if you're going to buy gold, do it with Nick, and I think you ought to do it with Nick because it's transparent. Market today, mixed. Not very exciting. Dow is down 0.32, S&P down 0.01, NASDAQ up 0.05. I think they're just kind of waiting to see what happens with this remarkable surge in AI investment and energy infrastructure that's happening that I talked about with John Ellis earlier. If you missed that segment, it'll be on the podcast, the Big Weekend Pod. I hope you subscribe and like the Highly Concentrated Hugh podcast. I hope you watch the whole show if you want it on YouTube, and that you like and subscribe on YouTube. Let me also tell you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I'm holding up my Relief Factor bag because I take Relief Factor every single day. And I want you to know I do that because it makes me feel better every day. And I got 3 miles in again today. Not what I really like to do. I like to get out and go longer than 3, but that's what I had to work with. I could go 3 miles today. Relief Factor helps you do all that you want to do and feel great about doing it afterwards, especially you weekend warriors. You're going to go water skiing this weekend. You're going to play hoops with a friend of yours. You're going to do, I don't know, something dumb. You're going to strain a muscle. You're going to lift too much weight. You're going to throw your shoulder out. Something's going to happen, and Relief Factor will make it feel much, much better. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or visit their website. Find the starter pack for $19.95 at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Now, I've got a cut here that Dwayne gave me. Cut number 8. This is Barack Obama on the podcast his wife and her brother host. Cut number 8.
And that's one of the things that I think a lot of times boys need is not just exposure to one guy.
Mm-hmm. One dad.
One dad. No matter how good the dad
is. He can't be everything.
He can't be everything. And then that boy may need somebody to give the boy some perspective on the dad.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
One of the most valuable things I learned as a guy was I had a gay professor in college at a time when openly gay folks still weren't out of line, who became one of my favorite professors and was a great guy and would call me out when I started saying stuff that was ignorant. You need that to show empathy and kindness. And by the way, you need that person in your friend group so that if you then have a boy who's gay or non-binary or what have you, they have somebody that they can go, okay, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Right. So.
All right. Now, here's what I have to say about that. He's absolutely right about the fact that young men need, I think, about 6 other people besides their father in their life. None of them needs to be gay, and all of them can be gay if they're good people. That just sounded so odd that I wanted you to hear it because I'm not making it up when you hear people say Barack Obama was talking about, he's really talking about professors and adult people and not young men. There's nothing wrong with gay men and their being mentors to young men, nothing wrong at all. But what the key point, and he should have hammered it home, is every boy needs more than his dad. He needs a half dozen influencers in his life. Eli Lake is a columnist with the Free Press. He is a frequent guest on the Commentary podcast, and he has a fabulous podcast of his own called Breaking History. The most recent episode of Breaking History is part 1 of a 2-part series on the volcanic history of the state of Iran. prone to convulsions, prone to revolution. Eli, welcome. This is so timely because this is on Sunday, the 6-month anniversary of Donald Trump's second inauguration. And I think the most important thing he did was send the B-2s to destroy the Iranian nuclear program.
Yes.
And do you agree with that? But I just think far and away he changed history right there.
I think absolutely he did, and you're absolutely right. It was also the decision to support Israel ultimately. His coordination with Netanyahu, which we learned after the 12-day war, which had gone back. So it was a combination of those things to kind of support the ally and let Israel sort of show that it can be a very important, it can fight pretty well and pull these incredible operations off, and then to come in for that coup de grace. Absolutely, I think it was history making on his part for sure.
So this edition of Breaking History could not be better timed because the question is now, can the regime survive? Your first part is, well, not many regimes have survived very long in Iran. Well, you want to tell people about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to look at, and this is going to be looking at what I call Iran between its revolutions. So we know all as Americans about 1979 because of the hostage crisis, and that's when Ayatollah Khomeini and we call it the Islamic Revolution, and it changes the face of Iran extraordinarily so, and ends 2,500 years of monarchies going back to the Achaemenid Persian Empire. But there was a revolution before that starts in 1906, which is called the Constitutional Revolution. And that's really where this first part begins. And we're going to kind of take it up to the 79 revolution, which gives us the Iran of today. But we should notice that the theocratic Iran after 1979 still has a supreme leader, which is another way of saying a Shah. So yes, the Pahlavi dynasty is replaced, but it is replaced with almost a kind of new religious dynasty. And there are differences, of course, but the style is the same. And what I look at, as I call it, is the Iranian kind of paradox or the Iranian riddle, which is that there is all of this ferment, particularly in the 20th century, of Iranians organizing, using people power to try to fight for what we would consider to be democracy, but that these hinge moments, 1925, 1941, 1953, and I would say also, of course, 1979, the Democrats, the liberals, the constitutionalists end up empowering an autocratic leader. And it's something I think...
What you taught me is that I've heard about the Arab Street since I was a kid. The Arab Street is this mythical giant force in the Middle East that can result in revolution. I hadn't really thought of there being an Iranian street, but I think you've proven pretty conclusively there is an Iranian street, and it comes out every 50 years or so. So I'll wait for part 2, but give us a preview. Do you think it's going to come out again?
I think that it's come out. I mean, first of all, we've seen national demonstrations 5 times since 2017. That's not counting the 2009 Green Movement, where hundreds of thousands of Iranians came out to protest the stolen election, and the student uprisings of 1999. So I think that there's a lot there. We don't know who the leaders are, but that's also not novel in Iranian history. The constitutional revolution was a leaderless revolution for the most part. Will it lead to Jeffersonian democracy? There, I'm not so sure. And I do think it would be valuable in some ways to have a figure, perhaps it will be the son of the deposed Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who has entered into the arena in some ways and has kind of started a movement to try to get an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps people to defect, and has said that he wants to transition the country to a democracy. I support that if it can. Maybe people will rally behind him. But there is something that, to understand Iran, it's to understand this paradox, this sort of ferment for self-rule, and yet kind of always lining up behind the strong man.
It's not unlike Russia, really. Russia's always had a czar, and we've called them different things, but they end up with the czar, and it's in their DNA. I thought the first part was brilliant. Now I want to go to since I think that's the most important part of Donald Trump's 6 months, I want to tell you what I think is the biggest mistake: lifting the sanctions on Jolani. I think Osama bin Laden, followed by Zawahiri, followed by Zarqawi, followed by al-Baghdadi. I think the next name in that line is Jolani. And I think we made a mistake. What do you think?
Well, it's very interesting. It does come back to Iran in this following sense. When Khomeini rises to power in 1979, the Western media, and you were around for this, portrayed him as a democratic figure. They believed him when he said he believed in democracy, but with the guidance of Islam, not bothering to read anything else he'd written, which he'd written a lot, or to interrogate exactly what that would mean. With Jelani, we're kind of getting a replay of this. He's telling us in the West what we want to hear. And that has been enough to try to begin the steps to bring him into the family of nations. Now, what's interesting is what we saw this week, as I'm sure you're referring to, the Israelis are watching the actions. And when he moves his military south of Damascus and begins the sort of senseless killing of Druze civilians, the Israelis said, those are two red lines and you can't cross them. I thought that Benjamin Netanyahu explained that military strike brilliantly. He said it was two things. He said he had spoken with the leader of the Druze community in Israel, who said, this is a genocide of our people and you can stop it. And he did. And he also said, we told them, we've communicated, there's a red line. You may not put your military forces south of Damascus. We enforce that red line and we'll see what happens. But that is very valuable, because if Israel isn't there, in some ways you could say acting like a superpower, right? That's what America used to do.
They are. They're a nuclear superpower. They are among the club.
Right. So anyway, I think that Netanyahu is the one who's saying trust but verify, and I think that you're right but Trump has proven that he is not an ideological restrainer. Trump is proving that he
can pivot.
Come around.
He can pivot.
Yeah. He pivoted on Ukraine in a good way. Yeah.
I hope he pivots soon on that. Meanwhile, Breaking History is the podcast that will bring you up to speed on Iran. That's a great insight about Khomeini and Jelani, and I hope you make it in the next episode of Breaking History. Have a great weekend, Eli. Follow Eli at Eli Lake on X as well, and Breaking History wherever you find podcasts. Subscribe to the Free Press, by the way, or get left behind. Tarzana Joe is in the house. He is our poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. Now, while everybody is focused on the mayor of New York, I am focused on the wonderful, exciting, incredible news that was shared by the mayor of Los Angeles this week. Hey, people, stop the presses, or refresh your devices. The mayor of Los Angeles has fixed the homeless crisis. Because of her attention and all the money spent, the number here of homeless has gone down 4%. It's so crowded no one goes there, or so said Yogi Berra. To me, a slip of 4% seems like a rounding error. So how was this accomplished? How was the problem solved? The way they count the homeless has conveniently evolved. Attempting to eliminate the counting hurly-burly, the volunteers got started late and gave up counting early. They couldn't count in alleyways or in the parks or beaches. No wonder it's a triumph and the mayor's giving speeches. Unless my eyes deceive me, the number here increases. But that dear old LA Times just kissed her press releases. Despite the obfuscation, something is improving. The public knows the mayor lies. It's when her lips are moving. That's The Homeless Mess by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, a wonderful poem. I'm sure our California listeners especially will want to go to tarzanajoe.com to download that and distribute it. Judge Carter, if you're listening, you too can get that. If you need a poem, by the way, you can write and get a commissioned poem from Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com, tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Joe, I'm looking at your backdrop, and it's changed significantly from last week. You've got a 2, which is your book cover. I don't know what the letter is. Is that the Mayor Villaraigosa letter? Oh, you got a nice chair.
At my 50th birthday, which seems 7 generations ago, you used your wonderful connections to have a letter of recognition from the mayor to Tarzana Joe. So it fits in with the mayoral theme. And what else is here? Oh, this lovely plaque. This is to Rosemead Joe from the city of Rosemead when I wrote a poem for their dedication of the monument.
Where are the hockey trophies? Where are the hockey trophies? I knew it. Dwayne keeps his softball. In fact, I hope the next edition of Dwayne's World is about his softball team, because my current audience doesn't know about Dwayne's epic failure as a softball player. But Dwayne's World is his podcast. You think could you two do there he is showing off his hardware from the beer league that he was in 1,000 years ago. Joe, have you got anything that big?
Well, yes, but it was speech and debate, and that's a while ago.
Oh, that doesn't even count. No. But I'm glad to hear you're a speech and debate nerd. Remember, for your poetry needs, go to tarzanajoe@reagan.com. For your podcasting needs, thank you, Joe. For your podcasting needs, go download Dwayne's World. He just put up a new episode today, Dwayne's World podcast, wherever they are found. And, of course, stay tuned for Dr. Larry Arnn. The Hillsdale Dialogue is coming up. And don't forget Texas. Over at the top of HughHewitt.com, the Help Texas banner is there. Thank you for helping in.